things going on.
Is it though, do you think? I mean, the left, they say that the end justifies the means. They say that there's no such thing as absolute truth, but they want particular things in society. I mean, if you look at the dedication of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, he dedicates it to Satan himself. And they say, we don't have any rules, but we find it very useful to hold our enemies by their own standards, right? So I don't know that they're being hypocritical if, and again, I'm not saying that all leftists subscribe to this, but I don't think they're being hypocritical if in general they say that the ends justify the means and then they manipulate facts to achieve their ends.
It's also to do with like people in general, like we're taught, lying's wrong. But then there are times when you do lie, for the greater good.
Can you okay, let's start with that because that's an interesting question. Give me an example of a lie that would be for the greater good.
Well, I was trying to think of examples, and I tried to stay away from things that were like life and death because they're kind of,
they never happen, right?
Yeah, but let's say, for example, one I did think of was, say if you were on a passenger airplane and one of the engines failed. Plane was fine. It's not going to crash. But should the pilot tell the passengers, or should he keep that to himself? Like something like that. What you see, like in TV and movies and stuff. A disaster happens or whatever, and the authorities decide not to tell the people, because of panic or whatever.
Right.
What's better? Is it better that the people are told the truth, or is
no? I mean, certainly in that in that situation, if the plane is flying fine and there's no particular danger, why would you bother telling people? I mean, they can't do anything about it, and they're not in any danger. It's just going to make them freak out for no good purpose. But you're not lying.
Yeah.
Right. Withholding of information is not the same as lying, right?
I think it depends on the intention. I think like whether it's malicious or, whether it's for what you perceive to be a good reason.
Sorry. Hang on. There's a moral problem with lying by omission if you're expected to tell the truth and if the other person has the expectation that you're telling the truth, right?
Yeah, so if they believe that you would be telling the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, if someone asks you something specific and you just kind of fudge and bury something, then that clearly is conscious, right? But if let's say, like I've done this show, I very rarely will get a headache, right? But every now and then I'll do a show, I've got a headache. Now, I haven't, and I think one time I said I have a headache, but so I don't announce it. Am I lying to the audience by not saying I have a headache? No. I mean, if I can do a good show with a headache, then I'll do a good show with a headache, but I'm not lying to someone because there's no expectation that I have to say every minor physical ailment I might be in possession of when I do a show. Does that make sense?
In those instances, that definitely wouldn't.
But let's
lying.
Sorry, let me give you another example. Now, if I decided to do an opposite show, right? Like, if I decided to be mean in a show or to be anti-rational in a show, but I didn't announce that as my intention before or afterwards, that I think would be lying. Because people have an expectation that I'm going to be rational in the show, or you strive there too, right? But if I've suddenly decided to reverse my methodology for some reason, then I should say that, right? If like, let's say it was April Fool's or something like that. I mean, it's at least afterwards, I should say, right? Something, right? And so if people have a rational expectation of consistent behavior, and then I break that consistent behavior, I think that is something where I should say, well, I've made a decision to do something different and blah, blah, blah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Like I've said, I think anger is very healthy. And, so if I get angry, I'm not breaking my rules of behavior. But if I do something that egregiously breaks my rules of behavior, and I've made that sort of conscious choice to do so, then I think I owe it to the audience to say why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? And so this aspect of things, I think, is sort of how you build up trust and this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So lying by omission, I think, is important if it's expected, or if it's something that other people have an assumption about that you're changing or violating, then I think you owe them that explanation. But none of that is occurring in the situation you talk about with the airplane, where one of the engine goes down, right? People are expecting to have a calm flight from A to B. That can still occur. And now, of course, if they can see that the engine stops, you probably want to say something. But if they can't, then you're not breaking a pattern that they're in anticipation of continuing by withholding the information from them.
So let me just bring it round to something recent and political. I didn't really want to bring politics into it, but you can't. I mean, maybe that's just my bias, but you can't talk about lying and fake news without talking about leftists. They kind of go hand in hand. Let's take the Jeff Sessions thing that happened recently, where he met with a Russian ambassador, but when he was asked at the time during the campaign, he said he hadn't. I'm going to use a counter for that.
Let's get the facts more clearly. Mike, do you want to jump in on this?
I know the facts, but
hang on. Mike studied this a little bit more. We were trying to decide whether to do a show about this. Mike, if you're there, if you wanted to go over this particular one.
Jeff Sessions was asked by Al Franken about continuous coordination between the Trump campaign and Trump campaign surrogates and the Russian government in some way, shape, or form. And in the context of that, Sessions said, I haven't been involved in that, for the lack of better phraseology. And then later it came out that he had met the Russian ambassador in his office once, as he had many other ambassadors, and also at a event, a Heritage Foundation event, I believe. He was giving a speech and he came off stage and briefly greeted the Russian ambassador and a crowd of people. And apparently now this is massive collusion with the Russians. So Sessions has just put in I think it was the other day, he put in a statement amending his testimony to clarify it, but he was answering in the context of prolonged collaboration as a Trump campaign surrogate between the Russian government or the Trump campaign as a whole and the Russian government. He was answering about that and if he knew anything about that or had been involved in that. And he said no. But it did come out that he had met the Russian ambassador twice, once very briefly after his speech and once as part of his normal duties.
So the question wasn't to Jeff Sessions, have you ever met with the Russian ambassador? The question was, are you involved in ongoing collusion or collaboration with Russian officials? And the answer to that is clearly no. And then, of course, the left-wing media played this whole gotcha game of, you met with the Russian, but that wasn't the question. And so, if you want questions, and this is sort of to do with perjury and so on, it is up to the job of the person who's asking the question to clarify what he or she is looking for. You can't ask a question like, if I said to you, hey, Richard, are you involved in a long-term relationship with such and such a lady? And you say, well, no, right? I can't then later say, well, have you ever had a meeting with her in your office? Or have you ever shook her hand after a speech? That's amending the question, right? That's, that's not fair after, to ask you, well, you are involved in a long-term relationship with this woman. And then I changed it. Well, what I actually meant was, have you ever shaken her hand? Well, that's not what I asked in the first place. So there's no perjury involved if you don't clarify your question. And it's not fair to ask a question of collusion and then change it. So as the media did to say, well, he's misrepresenting or lying because he didn't talk about these flyby meetings or pass-by handshakes or whatever. So is that sort of what you mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's great that we clarified that because I think some people might not have heard about the recent one where it's like they all met at this ball, but it was basically a hello, next, meeting. But yeah, the reason I raised
sorry to interrupt, but if somebody said to me, have you ever had a long-standing relationship with Michael Caine? I would say no. Now, it would actually turn out that I sat next to Michael Caine in a movie theater during the premiere of one of his movies many years ago when I was dating this woman who was working at the Toronto Film Festival. And so I saw a lot of films. By the way, the Sin Compasione, the Spanish language version of, I think it was made in Brazil, of Crime and Punishment was fantastic. I've got to watch that again at some point. But no, so I don't have a relationship with Michael Caine. However, I did sit next to his giant bulk in a movie theater, watching him watch his movie. So, clarification time would come up. It's
completely unacceptable how you've had your massive collusion with Michael Caine from me.
Right.
We need to have a conversation after the show.
Oh no, Mike's engaging in a Caine mutiny. Oh, there's a joke for people who know old movies. Anyway, sorry, Richard, go ahead.
Yeah, it was just that, I kind of understood that it was within context. I think most people did, maybe it was questionable for some, but generally I feel that most people understood it was within the context of the whole surrogate of the campaign type. But then, the senator, she says, nobody meets Russian ambassadors in that job. I've never met Russian ambassadors in the 10 years I've worked there. But then we find tweets of her tweeting, oh yeah, I'm meeting Russian ambassador today. And there's photos of her doing it. So, on the one hand, you've got leftists trying to claim that Jeff Sessions deliberately lied when asked a very vague question within context of campaign. And then you've got this lady popping along, literally lying through her fucking teeth. And nobody cares except for people on the right. It seems as if, and this, I'm really generalizing here, but the left-wing media really seems they're at a place now where only relevant facts matter. So all this bullshit about fact-checking Donald Trump during the campaign and fact-checking this and that, they only really fact-check when it's relevant. When opposing facts are presented,
the left
they cut the feed.
The left doesn't care about facts. The left, they don't care about facts. And they openly state that. It's all about the end justifies the means. See, the way that the leftist mind works, if I can use the word very loosely, is something like this. Jeff Sessions is Hitler. Now, whatever we have to do or say to keep Jeff Sessions from becoming Attorney General, or if we fail in that mission to prevent him from becoming Attorney General, everything that we can do or say to undermine his authority as Attorney General is perfectly justified. Why? Because Jeff Sessions is Hitler, right? So once you have these hysterical, maniacal exaggerations of the imaginary immorality of your enemy, then the end justifies the means. And this is, if you could, it's the old, if you could kill Hitler question, right? Before Hitler, this is standard sort of narrative, the question that people have. Well, if you've defined someone as literally Hitler, does a white lie matter in terms of keeping Hitler from achieving his nefarious goals of whatever they imagine the Republicans are about to do, namely enforce the law? So the left has made it very clear in their massive exaggerations and extrapolations of the imaginary evils of the Republicans that they will stop at nothing because they're in a fight to save the last shreds of civilization from the encroaching Nazi hordes of republicanism, right? So the moment that they start talking about the basket of deplorables, the racist, sexist, Islamophobic, homophobic, blah, blah, well, these people are just the leftist projection is that the right is irredeemably evil. And who cares about niceties when it comes to defeating irredeemable evil, right? I mean, in the very exaggeration of this imaginary immorality, they have clearly signaled that they have no intention of respecting truth. So the left would look at her and say, well, given that Jeff Sessions is so evil, yes, it was worth trying a lie to discredit him. Yeah, it was worth it. Okay, so you lied, but he's irredeemably evil. So your lie versus his irredeemable evil is like trying to find a sunspot on the sun with your bare eyes, right?
Yeah. It's baffling, to be honest, Steph.
No, I'm explaining it. What's baffling? Why is it baffling?
No, it's just baffling that people still behave it. Can I read something? I was looking before. I was on Scientific American, and I was looking at an article they wrote that says why people fly from facts. And they had a really interesting study that they did. It's very brief. They basically sat down. It says 174 American participants, and for one group, they said that same-sex marriage. There's scientific facts that say same-sex marriage is equal to or better than opposite-sex marriage. For raising children.
Right.
And they told the other group that it's actually bad for same-sex marriage. Child raising is actually negative compared to the opposite. And what they found was that people who believed in same-sex marriage raising couples that were told that it's scientifically proven to be detrimental, they made it a moral argument and said, well, it's not about facts, it's about morals.
Mm-hmm.
And the group that was told, oh, factually, scientifically, it's actually better for them, those people said, yeah, obviously it's not about morals, it's about facts.
Sure.
And it's the same thing when it's almost like the facts don't even matter because they've already made up their mind.
Oh, yeah, we've got a whole presentation called The Death of Reason about all of this. Here's an interesting little tidbit, right? So the Democrats, you see, they're so concerned about foreign influences over election that, of course, Hillary Clinton's happy to take tens of millions of dollars from the Saudis because and to hand over a quarter of America's uranium production to the Russians because they're so concerned about Russia and foreign influences and so on. Russia's largest bank, Sberbank, has confirmed today that it hired the consultancy of Tony Podesta, the elder brother of John Podesta, who chaired Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, for lobbying its interests in the United States and proactively seeking the removal of various Obama-era sanctions. So Russian influence over the election. Well, the brother of the guy who chaired Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign was hired by Russia's largest bank to lobby for its interests in the United States. Do you think that the brother of the chairman of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign might have been able to get through to his brother and ask him for a favor or two, theoretically? But you see, they're very, very concerned about Russian influences on the American election and electoral process. It's just shocking, don't you know? Right. So, yeah, absolutely. And this is, I'm just finishing up I finished the first draft, just working on the second draft of my book, The Art of the Argument. And I've got a big section ripping up sophist, but I also want to just sort of say where sophistry comes from. Sophistry comes from the absence of reason. If you don't know how to reason, what do you have to do? You pick a team based on emotions, and then you just blind yourself to anything that goes against that team's narrative. Right? That's where this stuff comes from. You have a team, and the team that you're on holds your allegiance, and you tell yourself that your team is the best. Like if you're in a football team or a soccer team or whatever, then you say, well, my team is the best and I want my team to win. You kind of understand. Like I remember when I was a kid, my friends and I used to go Saturday mornings for 10 pennies, I guess about a quarter. We used to go and watch a bunch of cartoons and usually one short movie in a theater near where I grew up near Crystal Palace in London. And the first sports movie I watched was about, the plucky underdogs in, I think it was a soccer game and so on. I don't know. This is a very vague thing, but this was around 1975, 1976. No, actually. Yeah, 1974, 1975 or something like that. If anyone knows, a short film. I think it was black and white. Anyway, let me know. Also, by the way, since I'm talking to the Borg brain, when I was a kid, I also watched a movie. I think it was again shot in black and white about a sword fight in Scotland in the Middle Ages. And it was one of these things that was deeply shocking to me because I'd seen a whole bunch of war films, but where it's like the cowboys and Indians films when you grow up and the Indians, they get shot and they just kind of jump off. There's no blood spraying. There's none of this Saving Private Ryan gallons of red thing, but they just kind of jump off and it looks all very clean and clinical. I remember watching this movie. It was playing in a library and it was a sword fight and like guys got stabbed and they were like writhing around on the ground and it took them like hours to die and they just kept going. And this guy's still alive and he's, was coughing up all this blood. I just remember thinking, oh my God, war is like vicious and brutal and ugly and gross. And if anybody knows of that film, please let me know. I would like to watch it again and see what it's like 40 plus years later. Anyway, for me. But I remember watching this sports film, The Plucky Underdogs Who Trained and Became Very Good. And of course, you root for them because they're the kids you know, they're the kids you see interacting, they're the kids you find out about their home lives. And the other kids are just these blanks, just these faces, and usually, mean, ugly faces, the mean guy in Karate Kid. And so naturally you end up rooting for the underdogs who are going to win, or whatever, the Mighty Ducks or whatever they were. I mean, that's a skating film, but you know what I mean. But it became very clear to me, like I was watching it, and just on the way out, I remember thinking, yeah, okay. But if the camera had been on the other side of the field, then I'd just be cheering for those kids, because those kids have their story, and those kids have their history, and those kids want to win. And so, if you follow one side of the sports team, then you want them to win. And if you follow the other side of the sports team, you want them to win. But there's no morals particularly involved in it. Not only because usually the sides are morally equal, it's very rare that you have the evil team versus the virtuous team, but also it's sports. It's not a moral engagement. The wins or the losses have nothing to do with ethics. So this is the way people operate in the absence of philosophy, in the absence of morals, in the absence of ethics, in the absence of reason and evidence. They pick a team, usually for emotional reasons, and then they support everything that supports their team and reject everything that denies their team. And the reason we're so good at this is that this is basically the essence of tribalism. So,
and it disappoints me, to be honest, because I like to think that people inherently change their views when presented with new information, but that's not how it plays out. Like, if I can, like, before Brexit, I was a bit of a leftist, to be honest. And it was actually one of your videos that made me vote the way I did. And
really?
Changed my viewpoint.
How nice.
Yeah. I got a letter through the post. I think it was off Richard Branson. And he was like, vote Remain. It's going to be great, lads. And I was like, yeah, I might vote Remain, And my missus was like, well, look into it. So I did. And I voted Leave. And
Richard Branson?
He was marketing, for Virgin as a businessman. He was saying, like, everyone has to vote Remain.
Why was he? I don't know much about Richard Branson other than the fact that he looks like a very gay pirate. But why would he care? I mean, what was he? Is he some globalist guy? And don't even get me started on John Cleese. Oh, I'll do a rant about that later. But sorry, go ahead.
Steph, you might not know this, but Richard Branson was hanging out with Barack Obama right after he left the presidency. So yes, he's Mr. Globalist man.
Oh, is he? Okay. So.
Yes.
The whole Brexit campaign was just a circus of politicians and celebrities getting together, like the US election. So you had all these celebrities, all these businessmen coming out of the woodwork, like Richard Branson, and like the boss of Sainsbury's or whatever was involved. The guy who owns JCB was for Leave, so he was campaigning for Leave. Bosses were sending emails to their employees saying, make sure you vote Remain, otherwise you might as well not bother working here. Things like that.
Nice.
But essentially, I was going to vote Remain because I was just a blind zombie to everything. I always voted bloody Labour.
Well, it's also, cohesion is good. Keeping the family together is good. It's like a divorce. That's bad. I mean, it's just that emotional stuff that you get, right?
Yeah, we'll be friends.
Yeah.
We're friends. I can go and get some wine.
Yeah,
really
the people in Brussels are like my family because they care so much about me.
But I watched Brexit the movie, and I watched a couple of your videos, Steph, and it was like, wow. I didn't realize it was like this shit.
I could do nothing else for the rest of my life and still die a proud man because of a couple of things I've done in this area. But I really appreciate hearing it from the ground. Thanks.
Yeah, so that started my journey basically, and I'm at this stage now because I've always been a fan of science. Like empirical evidence is like, that's what you need. Empirical evidence, absolute truth.
But most scientists don't do it that way, right?
Yeah, I mean, something has to be falsifiable for it to be scientific.
No. What I mean is that, most scientists don't follow the scientific method. In other words, there's an old saying in science that science advances one funeral at a time. Which means that there's all these people who believe in a particular paradigm. Some new paradigm comes along and nobody changes their mind. They eventually just die, and then the younger generation takes over, and that's how science advances.
Yeah, I can see that. To be honest, can't see that.
And this is government science, you understand? I mean, it's not the way things work in the free market. It's just when government runs science, you get all of this crap.
Yeah, because they have like financial investment.
Yeah, well, the free market makes you change. You know, I mean, if I was an academic, I could still be waffling on about a stateless society, which, you know, is still my ideal and all of that. But, you know, I kind of had to get out of the ivory tower because there were things that needed to be done in the world much more immediately in order for that other conversation to continue. Yeah, I mean, I don't have the luxury of perfect consistency to ideology because I'm market facing and things need to be done. And if Hillary Clinton had gotten in, things wouldn't have been able to be done very long or very easily. And she would have harmed my friends.
Yeah, I think we dodged a bullet there for sure. Oh, yeah. And I know you had Cassie J on for the Red Pill movie, didn't you? You had her on. I watched that yesterday. That came out. That is another example, I think, of where, you know, there's these actual facts, empirical evidence that say these things, you know, proof that the patriarchy isn't what feminists think it is. And yet it's just ignored, you know. It really, I struggle with it sometimes, and I wonder, like, what sort of dickhead believes something and then is told the opposite, shown data, and then goes, oh yeah, but you know, it's you know, I feel like it is what it is. I feel it in me bones.
But why do you think, I mean, I hate to use this sort of evolutionary explanation, but you did talk about science. Why would we have evolved the capacity to have fidelity to reality over social acceptance? We're a social animal. We require social cooperation to survive, to exist, to have children, to all of that. So why would we have evolved to champion empirical reality and objective reason over social acceptance when social acceptance is necessary for us to live?
Yeah, and I think you might have touched on that in one of your videos. That rings a bell.
Yeah.
It kind of leads in with my second question as well, which is a bit of a smaller one.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to get kicked out of the village, basically. You know.
Right. Right.
It's almost like a survival instinct to follow the group. You know, if you're an outspoken thinker, I think, like you said in the past, you know, like if you were seen as being treasonous because you had political ideas that didn't gel with the king or whatever, you know, it was bad. And we saw it, you know, early science back in like early Renaissance times, you know, Galileo and stuff like that. They were really mistreated because it went against the church. It went against what people thought, what people reasoned. And I just thought we'd evolved past that, to be honest, you know, with scientific evidence and, you know, data and statistics.
But here's the thing, Richard, you're complaining that people don't change their beliefs according to reason and evidence, but the reason and evidence is that people don't change their beliefs according to reason and evidence, which you're rejecting.
Yeah.
I mean, physician, yeah, heal thyself, if you know the saying.
Actually, yeah, that's right. Yeah. I've just proved myself a prick.
No, not at all. You've just proven that it's difficult.
You want
to believe that people change their minds based on reason and evidence. And listen, Richard, I'm totally there. I mean, I spent even the first year of, I don't even know how many years of my public intellectual life I spent on that basic idea, saying, well, no, I have the facts, I have the reason, I have the evidence. So I understand that people might kick and scream a little bit, but they'll come around. And it's like, nope. I had to like dig deeper and try and find out the reasons why. So I completely understand where you're coming from. And I have been there, and I occasionally drift back there myself still. But I don't think anyone ever went wrong I don't think anyone ever went wrong underestimating the irrationality of the species at times.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a weird thing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And what's weird, of course, is that there's this doublethink that happens. People don't like to think that they're prejudiced, so they do like to think that their beliefs are reflecting reason and evidence, right? So they claim, with the exception of religious people and the exception of other kinds of people who have the word faith, and, you know, not to diss that in the moment, but they don't say it's objective scientific reason and evidence because of X, Y, and Z. They'll say there's indications and so on, but they won't generally claim that the existence of God is predicated on objective reason, science, and evidence. They'll say it's a matter of faith, right? It's revelation and so on. But most people, particularly on the left, they don't usually have the word faith. They portray themselves as reason and evidence-based, right? Well, what was communism? Scientific materialism is considered to be science. And if you look at the social sciences, if you look at the way that the left portrays things, they portray their beliefs as being derived from reason and evidence, right? And so, like as I was talking earlier, they say, well, women are half the population, therefore women should be half the high achievers in the top fields, right? But then when you look at the bell curve and you realize that there are far more men than women at the highest levels of intelligence, you'd think that they would then say, oh, okay, well, that's actually facts that would have to help me adjust my thinking. But they don't. Even though the left doesn't have faith in the metaphysical sense with regards to a deity, they have faith with another deity called radical egalitarianism, which is also appeal to the least. And what that means is that anything which goes against their faith in radical egalitarianism, they wish away. They just wish it away. They magic it away because it interferes with their faith. Now, their faith is predicated on resource transfers, right? And that is the big challenge. When you have a superstition based on resource transfers, it's very, very tough to battle. Because, the old saying goes, it's very tough to make a man understand something when his entire income depends upon him not understanding that thing. And so, women get a lot of resources from the state, and the way they get those resources from the state is they say, well, women and men are exactly the same, with all the same economic opportunities, all the same investment into work, and all the same intelligence. Therefore, any numerical discrepancies between men and women must be due to sexism, which is wrong, and therefore you need to fix it by taking resources from unjust sexist men and giving it to us, right? So the radical egalitarianism is a lever by which resources are taken away from men and given to women, because that's just so independent and modern and feminist to use the power of the state to take resources from men and give it to women. Anyway, so you have this radical egalitarianism, which is both an ideology and a methodology for transferring hundreds of billions of dollars from men to women, trillions of dollars worldwide. And so if you're going to sort of oppose this radical egalitarianism and say, well, there are gender differences in brain size, there's gender differences in neural connections, there's gender differences in availability of individuals to the workforce because of women and kids and breastfeeding and pregnancy and so on, and there's differences in testosterone or aggression and so on. And so this explains everything, almost everything to do with outcomes. If people accept that, then they have to stop running to the government to get a whole bunch of free stuff. And asking people to support the revocation of a superstition that is enormously profitable to them is virtually impossible. The financial incentive is just follow the money. Like forget the ideology. Just follow the money. The ideology is like the person who bumps into you so the pickpockets can steal your watch. If you chase after the person who bumped into you, you're not going to find the watch. And if you chase after the ideology without looking at cui bono, who benefits, where, follow the money trail, and you'll find out what the real motivation for the ideology is.
Well, like in the Red Pill movie, it says that men actually have a higher risk of dying of cancer than women have. And that risk increases if you remove all gender-specific cancers. It goes up to like 58% or something. Mm-hmm. And yet breast cancer is the one that's massively funded.
Sure.
Not prostate cancer. And it's one of them things where they're presented with information. Like the facts are, more men are successful. There's more men in the workforce in like higher paying jobs or whatever. But the assumption as to the cause is they might as well have pulled out of a fucking book. It's completely baseless. It's almost as if they've gone, what's the biggest thing that we can pretend exists and we don't have to prove? Do you know what I mean? There's no evidence for it because like in the Red Pill movie, the society is built on the forced gender roles of both genders. I'm supposed to go out and protect my family, raise my family, provide day or night, rain or shine. That's my job.
Right.
So with that as an evolutionary trait, you would assume that there would be more men in those jobs because it's our role, if you know what I mean. So they ascribe like the gender roles as because of the patriarchy rather than the other way around. The reason why there is a male overabundance within the workforce and stuff is because of the gender roles. It's not nefarious. It's just the way it is. This is how we've evolved. You know? But it has to be an evil thing. It has to be, you know, a ghost in the ether.
Well, no, that's because it's profitable to portray it as an evil thing. Because then you can run to the government and say, well, you've got to do all these things to give us all these preferential bonuses, right? Right. So graduates of the Harvard Business School, right? Harvard Business School is the top business school in America. At least it was when I was younger. Maybe it still is or whatever, right? So women who've graduated from the Harvard Business School, only 30% of them aren't even in the paid workforce. And wow. 44% and only 56% of them work full time.
Well, that was a waste of money.
Well, yeah. Of course.
What a fucking waste.
Of course. Now, if you are, if you're a manager, right, and you've got a young man and a young woman coming in to your office, and they both have wedding rings on their fingers, right? So they're both married. You've got a young man and a young woman coming to your office, and they both want to have engineering jobs that are going to require a lot of travel, a lot of overtime. Who are you more likely to hire?
Probably the bloke.
Why?
He'd probably be more willing to do, you know, the overtime and all that.
Right, and the woman may get
my
paid.
guess, you know.
And the
yeah, I
woman
mean,
may
if we're
get
just,
paid.
you know, taking out all the variables, you know, that makes the most sense.
Right. Now, even if the woman says she doesn't want to have kids, she might change her mind. And this is nothing against women. I mean, I'm very glad that my mom was pregnant. It's provided me a whole lot of oxygen consumption that otherwise would not have occurred in this particular room, which would never would have been built. But now this is unfair, of course, to the women who are dedicated and don't want to have kids or don't want to interrupt their work. And you know, I understand it. It's a drag. It's a drag. And so women don't want to face the negative perceptions of potential employers if they are married and, you know, want to have kids or whatever it is, right? I understand that. And so, you know, what can you do in that situation? Well, of course, one thing you're going to do is you're going to make it illegal to ask a woman if she wants to have kids. You're going to make it illegal to ask, you know, about her future plans with regards to any of that stuff. And you're going to make it illegal to discriminate against women because they might want to have kids. And so what happens is then women get jobs that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have gotten. And then a lot of those women will end up having kids and leaving the workforce and so on. And I know women who are like this, women who were trained in technical fields who became full-time moms and so on. In which case society's, you know, got an educated mom, which is great. But, you know, we're short one engineer or a mathematician or a computer programmer or whatever it is, right? It's just the reality that women like to have babies. Men like to become fathers, and you can't be a good mother and work full time. It's just the way it is. But if you follow the money, then you say, okay, well, if you talk about radical egalitarianism and then you say, well, fewer women are being hired into high demand fields. I mean, I know this. I manage it. Young men will work all night, and some young women will as well. But the moms and the dads, they had to leave. I don't blame them. I'm glad. I didn't want them to stay. You've got children. Go spend time with your children. But it's a reality that they're just less productive. And at least, you know, in the sort of high tech field, in other areas, maybe more so. And I didn't discriminate in any way, shape, or form when it came to this stuff. But I can understand the sort of economic arguments from an abstract sense. But this is just the reality of you can't be in two places at the same time.
Mm. Yeah, I agree.
Because,
Definitely.
you know, there's this argument that comes up. It's like, well, you know, if there are fewer women at the highest level of the it's got to be glass ceiling. It's got to be sexism, which is sexist. I mean, not only is it sexist against men by claiming that they're sexist against women in general, but also it's sexist against women. Look, the women who make it to the top of the business profession, you know, like the Carly Fiorinis and so on, more power to them. I'm not sure she was that great a manager because HP lost a huge amount of money. But, you know, she worked hard. She started as a secretary. She ended up as head of the company. Fantastic. But why do they think that all women are like them? Do all women have to be that ambitious? It's the old thing. You mistake the world for yourself. Lots of women, and I've known these women and I've chatted with these women. They're like, yeah, I go to work, but I kind of want to be home. Like, I go to work and I enjoy working part-time so I can be home. I want to be home with my kids when they get home from school. I want to be available for them. I want to know what they're doing. I want to know who their friends are. I want to be involved in their lives, especially when they're teenagers, so they don't go drifting off the path or something like that. Now, these women are voluntarily choosing to spend more time with their children rather than more time climbing the corporate ladder. Are you going to tell them that that's a bad decision, that that's a wrong decision? Well, if you're a workaholic who doesn't want to spend time with their kids in particular, or at least prefers work to her kids, or you're just a workaholic and you've got to go work because you're compelled to do so for whatever dysfunction you have, well, that's your choice. Now, maybe you don't have kids, or maybe you just don't spend that much time with your kids. But who's to say whose choice is better? I mean, I think spending more time with your kids is generally a better idea. But the idea that, well, I sacrificed everything to climb the corporate ladder and other women didn't, and therefore those women need to have, you know, government remedies for their choices. It's like, no, they don't need government remedies for their choices because their choices are just different.
Exactly. I thought at the end of the day it was all about women being able to choose. You know,
right?
I thought that was the original point.
Right. Well, women are able to choose, but somehow they must all end up the same. Which is
you've got to
very sad.
the same. Yeah, makes a lot of sense, Steph.
All right. All right. Well, I'm going to close off here. Thanks, everyone, so much for your calls tonight. Most enjoyable. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to chat about deep and important issues with the planet as a whole. Please, please, please go by freedomainradio.com/donate to help out this most important conversation in this most critical juncture in the world. freedomainradio.com/donate. Help give me the resources to finish up this book. It's very, very important. And I promise you it's going to be a great book. And please use our affiliate link at fdrurl.com/Amazon. And last but not least, you can follow me on Twitter at Stefan Molyneux. Have a great night, everyone. I'm sorry, I just rebooted for a moment there. Have a great night, everyone. Thanks for the calls. I'll talk to you soon.